Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 246, recorded at Big Dog Studios in Eugene, Oregon. Today's show is made possible by... Oh man, that's such a pickup. You got to try this tiger tea from Sacred Blossom Farms. In fact, if you go to sacredblossomfarms.com right now and enter in Real Herb, all caps, 15, you can save 15% on your next order. Tell them that Practical Herbalist sent you. We often talk as herbalists about the wisdom of the plants and the deep healing and lessons they offer. Their cousins, the fungi, can open us up to a whole new world of wisdom if we dare explore it in partnership with them. Today we're talking with Bett Williams, author of The Wild Kindness, a Psilocybin Odyssey, and whose essays are appearing in Lucid News and Double Blind Magazine about partnering with the mushrooms. Now here are your hosts.
I'm Candace Hunter.
I'm Patrick Hunter.
And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio. Hey, Bett, welcome.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here.
I am so glad to have you here. I loved your book, I have to admit. It was quite a trip.
Well, I don't think it's what everybody necessarily expected. Having been around speaking at psychedelic conferences, they're like, oh, it's like literature. In some ways it has more to do with like Less Than Zero and Go Ask Alice and those drug books in the 90s. You know? Right. Except I didn't have to end with a drug addiction. Instead, I actually healed.
Yes. Yeah. You know, one of the things I loved about it was that you get the feeling of those psychedelics as you're reading it, because there's things that are very colorful and things that are like vivid and larger than life. Mm-hmm. And then there's also deep truths. So, you know, at one point I'm like, wow, we're standing right at the cliff's edge of this incredible truth of, oh my God, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, a few pages later, I'm like, wow, this is trippy. I can't believe, did this really happen? Seriously. You know, yeah. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you liked it.
I cannot even, I mean, I have to admit, I've done very little of things that alter consciousness beyond what I can do myself, in part because I've often lived sort of a strange like experience in terms of, you know, getting to know the plants and, and so to talk with someone who's used the mushrooms and healed from them, not had bad trips and, you know, all the horror stories, but actually has a really healthy relationship I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, you know, being on this wonderful herbalism podcast, I'm humbled to be around herbalists. Herbalists are the people who I am the most humbled by, because I'm inherently a lazy person. That one of the first time I did mushrooms, I was asking for help around my alcohol use, and the mushrooms showed me the landscape, and they said, first off, it took a Schedule I drug to awaken you to the fact that the plants around you can help you. Yeah. And in terms of your addiction to alcohol, your brain is out of balance because you're out of balance with the plant life that one is in your supermarket, but mostly is in your freaking yard. And so it showed me all the things around me and said, you know, firstly, to be in balance, pay attention to the plants around your house. Yes. And we're Schedule I drug and we're psychedelic as heck, and we'll trip you out and just acknowledge that it took a hammer to wake you up to what herbalists just automatically understand as a truth.
Right. Yeah. Well, even being in the herbal field, it's such a huge field. I mean, it's just, it's like every landscape on earth. It really is. And to me, the mushrooms are like the bedrock of that, you know, just like you said in the book. First there were mushrooms, then there was everything else. I mean, that's reality. That's how it is.
Terence McKenna has the idea of the stoned ape theory, which I disagree with on one point. He said that we walked around all hairy and naked, and somebody picked up a mushroom and everything got colorful and culture was born. I think all it took was the tiniest bit of any entheogenic plant, whether it was one of those DMT containing grasses, to see that every plant has a deva and has something to teach you. And I think we were wise enough at that time because we were in such an extreme state of having to gather our own food that I don't think there was such a big difference between the grandiose psychedelic experience and an experience with, let's say, yarrow or a plant that really spoke to you and healed you. I think we were able to perceive things more vividly in our pre-Platonic, Socratic, era of life.
Yes, I 100% agree with you on that. I often think of us humans as being kind of like we're still in that innocent child phase where we need to wake up and start to move beyond, like, how do I put this? We started off like in the ape man, the prehistoric man. We started off being like children, innocent, and we had no other knowledge. So here we were, and just like dogs know which herbs to use, and all the wild animals, they all know which ones. They don't have to eat poison to figure out it's poison. They listen to what the plants have to say. It's just the natural language of things. Yeah. And for us to get to the point of wisdom they are at, we had to move into science and technology. We had to shut those centers down. We had to develop other areas of our psyche as the human constructs that we are. And now I feel like we are in the process of moving back toward being able to hear what the plants are saying naturally. And the psychedelics are a part of helping us move as a species in that direction.
I think for an herbalist, mushrooms are essential. One thing I notice about them compared to, LSD is also helpful. But I think in terms of communicating with plants, to walk around a garden and ask each plant, what can you teach me? Is a pretty fail-proof enterprise if you're not crazy.
Yes. Yeah, well, and there have been an awful lot of herbalists who've been labeled crazy for quite some years, but
we need a little crazy. Like one of the place where I live, a man who I met at a local hot spring, he's a medicine man of Scottish descent, and he lived in Mexico in an expat hippie family, studied with Maria Sabina, who works with the mushrooms, who died in the 90s. He, his whole practice, I found out after he died, was to sing to plants and to acknowledge that every plant has a deva or an angelic presence that you can speak to. And with the mushrooms, there's, everyone speaks about the voice of the other and the entity that is the mushroom. I don't think any being doesn't have a being you can talk to.
Right.
Like,
yes, I've spoken to an awful lot of beings. And honestly, the native practices from, before pre-Columbian, Americas. And I would bet worldwide the same thing is, they say spirit is in everything. You know, this pen has spirit, although the pen being all plastic and, rather inanimate, because that's what we humans have created it to be, may not have as much as perhaps a feather quill may have had, but it's still there, And
everything you can talk to, like the mice in my house became a jinn, became a malevolent ghost in my house. And the ghost told me I had shit to deal with over by the refrigerator. Right. So I think all things like have the capability of turning into a little cartoon where you have a conversation.
Right.
And I think psychedelics that's like an innate thing, but I think how we were in the olden days was like you would have these conversations with the oversouls of things. You'd walk into a cul-de-sac and you would be like, something here is saying don't come over here.
Yes.
And who knows what that thing is necessarily, but we are, like it's like Walt Disney. People get mad that you like anthropomorphize the mouse in Walt Disney, but maybe there's more truth to that than we think. Right? That like our human brains like actually do that automatically, we can actually have that conversation.
It's true. I think it is a natural and normal part of human brains. It's just that we civilize it out of ourselves.
Yeah.
And most of us don't hang on to that thread, but that speaks to, like, I mean, Mickey Mouse speaks to a very primal space in us.
Yeah.
And that's,
And I bet there's
you know,
this stuff that has to do with actual mice. Like,
yes.
I don't, you know.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
They're a big part of our lives. I learned that recently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They can really, I mean, mice, especially mice that move into a house, they're, to some extent, they're all about the mess. I mean, they keep their own nests a total mess. They're mess makers.
Yeah.
And they have no problem making a mess and being surprisingly destructive. And it really, they call your attention to the areas where you need to refocus and the areas where you have boundaries open, you have holes.
Oh, wow.
And it's time to...
Yeah, they're an incredible teacher.
Yeah.
And just in terms of mushrooms, that was my last big mushroom trip, which was, I was preparing for the Psilocybin Summit. And I went outside and I felt Paul Stamets' presence in the juniper trees. And he walked with me inside and he pointed out my mouse problem. And my partner was literally sick by the refrigerator, looking gray and green, like Yoda-ish. And he said that, like, prairie women going way back have always chosen to sit in the most toxic part of the house in order to draw attention to where something needs to be fixed. And he was like, they died that way.
Right.
It's like nobody listened.
Right. That's one of the challenges of being a woman, is having your voice, learning how, I mean, we've had so many, currently in America, we may not have our voices fully repressed, but we have a heritage of ancestors who were not listened to, who weren't empowered. Even when they did speak their minds, they were not listened to. And they spoke with their whole bodies, like the prairie women.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to sit here and get sick until, husband, you move the refrigerator and find out there were mice fine there.
Right. Yeah.
Like that interconnectivity. I mean, if there's anything that's the mushrooms, it's exactly that story. And we have so much in our current world of like psychedelic psychotherapy, where you're going to heal relationships with the dead or your family or whatever. But we discount the importance of, one, the mushrooms told me, my dog, that I liked lamb and that my dogs like chicken, but I've been buying them lamb dog food the whole time. And like, when your dogs aren't eating their dog food, up ahead in the game, they're going to have teeth problems. They're going to get sick. They're going to be cranky. You'll be on a trip and they won't be eating. Like these simple little things that happen in our lives actually are what make up our lives.
Oh yeah. Life is what's happening in the moment. It's not, it's not like Hollywood with, a couple of things happen and suddenly you've saved the world. It's so rare. So rare.
And if your dog puked in your bed that morning when you were supposed to go get your Oscar, it's definitely going to put a damper on
That's going to, you're probably not going to look your best.
No. So I'm always holding down the fort of, like, mushrooms are teaching you things that pay attention to what you may not think is important, but that the mushrooms might think is important, because people who are new to this will often make a giant list of all the things that they want the mushrooms to help them with. And then they take a dose and they're immediately thrown sideways into like that they've never taken care of their carburetor, or they never called their uncle or their best friend from childhood. And they're like, wait a minute. I thought it was about losing weight or becoming famous or something.
Right. When you think about it, I mean, the mushrooms that we eat, whether they're psychedelic or not, that's the fruiting body of a huge network that's happening underground. And the happening underground is the important part.
It's intelligence. It's mycelial intelligence. They wrap themselves around the roots of trees so that when a tree dies, its information downloads into the mycelium, which is communicating to the other trees what this tree was going through and maybe why it died and how to avoid that, or just because it wants to share the information.
Yes. And it returns to the trees while they're living. It helps them process their nutrients, which is the same thing as digesting your experiences.
Yeah.
The mycelium helps the tree understand
yeah.
what to do next or how to grow next. I
Yes.
mean, the mycelium have everything to do with why the essential oils are as they are, or
I
the
like that. Yeah.
it's a symbiotic relationship. And there's
It's
all about
digesting. You're digesting is when everything is just like affected by acid and turns into a whole information that our brains don't understand. I
Right.
love that.
Yes, yeah, or at
So
least
our
our
egos
consciousness
can't get
doesn't
it.
understand.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
And it's all about the details. I mean,
Yeah.
everything is about the details, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, this bug landed on me. I've got a problem. What do I do about that? Well, you
Yeah.
know, here's an idea. Why don't you try this? Okay, I'll
You're
manufacture
the
that.
digestive acid.
Yeah.
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 So the fly on like our heads as a collective is no different from all the stuff you bring to the table as like a
Yes.
working artist or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's digestion. Digestion, everything is reduced to equal.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's breaking it down into something that you can assimilate, pretty much.
Because they do that with oil. Mushrooms do that with oil spills.
Mm-hmm.
And they can break up the oil, and then they can, well, what I say in the book is, is like at the end, it's like, well, what are they here for and why are they such a big deal right now?
Yeah.
And I'm so curious about that. And I think it's just that mushrooms do bring things into balance.
Yes.
And it may not be in the way that you think,
Right.
because I think a lot of people are like, not everybody should be doing mushrooms, but it's like more people than ever are probably going to be doing mushrooms.
Right. Right.
And so whatever the mushrooms have in mind is I'm curious about, because we can't control this.
Right. Right. Where do they see? Where do the details they believe are the ones we should be taking care of? Because those are probably the details we actually should take care of.
Yeah.
Let the other stuff go. It'll clean itself up in time. You turn the gear over here and the thing over there moves, Yeah. Sometimes it's noticing the details you can actually manage. Maybe cleaning the carburetor is the thing that you can do that will actually help you get your mind right so you're good in your relationship, or the weight loss happens, or whatever,
I know. In certain Christian churches, you'd see a little bit about that. Like, Jesus told me to fix the carburetor.
Right.
So they're tuned into mushroom consciousness.
Yeah.
They know what's really going to help them. Also,
totally.
Teenagers, for instance, marijuana is really not good to do until your brain has developed. But I've heard some stories about young people and mushrooms where this girl did it with her parents at age 15.
Mm-hmm.
And she had like this crying fest in the van with her parents. And it just healed the whole family system.
Right.
And, I hope they do a few studies, because I have a feeling that peyote, mushrooms, ayahuasca may be not as harmful as marijuana for younger people, and might be a way to have conversations about altered states with younger people. But, as Westerners, we have such gnarly boundaries with our kids that I wouldn't have wanted to do that with my parents, but but I know communities who are not white communities who have been able to pull off more of a like doing it with your grandpa and your teenage kid kind of situation.
Right. Yeah, trying to raise kids, it's challenging. Even without internet and all the other stuff that came along with that, it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's hard to navigate the world often just as an adult. It's hard to navigate.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to decide, well, do I let my kid get exposed to this or not? Oh, so many. It's exhausting. You know.
I know. I watch my friend's kid go to all these festivals and buying psychedelics from the person at the rave, and I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh, but it's what I would have done at that age too.
Oh yeah. We've watched our own. He's just turning 18, and
oh, there you go.
Yeah,
we're right in it.
Yeah, we're right in it, and we're watching him make choices, and some of them were like, oh God, no. Okay, I've got to let you. I did it
2.5 hours to a forest rave to meet the person at the door and show them a picture of my friend's kid. And I said, oh, and they were like, oh, we saw her. And I said, well, you make sure she has good drugs, not bad drugs.
Yeah.
Make sure she gets good drugs.
Make sure she gets the right ones.
Yeah,
Right?
Good LSD, no bath salts.
Yes. Yes. True. So true.
One of the benefits of the Herbal Nerd Society is getting custom content written for you every month. Another thing that you get as an Herbal Nerd Society member is the ability to say what you want to hear in our herbal conferences and those herbal articles. You also get an ad-free viewing environment for the Practical Herbalist. Join today at theherbalnerdsociety.com.
So we have coming up, just like in a week or so here, we've got a ballot of the votes happening. And in our state, psilocybins are on the ballot. And the style that they're talking about here is the centers. The language of the ballot is somewhat vague. You don't have to be a doctor to be a facilitator at said centers. So I don't know how exactly this is going to evolve if it passes.
I thought it was for legalization for therapeutic use only, and then you get a certificate.
Yeah,
that's the same measure. Dr. Bronner's supporting it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But they're very clear about the fact that you do not have to be an MD or you don't have to hold a doctorate. You do have to get their certificate. So whatever training they give you or is involved, I don't know. But, and you're not allowed to have the mushrooms outside of the facility. So it's not like you can do it at home. Like when we legalized medical marijuana here in this state, you would go and yes, you had to go to a doctor and go through the healthcare system and get a prescription. Then you had to go find a grower and, it was a big thing, but you could take it in your home where you could create your own ceremonies or rituals or spaces so that you could work with what came up in your own space. Mm-hmm. For this, it's definitely not going to be allowed in your own space. Yeah. But Patrick suggested he thought it was maybe a good idea because it's kind of like the early days of medical marijuana in that it's at least a step closer. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought it was like full on BS when they took that turn when it happened, but people I respect are saying this is a moment that we need to move through. So I'm holding that as possibly true. I don't think the people involved in these things are highly targeted by the law. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there's a whole lot to worry about, but I've heard that, like, let's say a mushroom practitioner who has a license is found with an illegal amount of marijuana in their house. I've read like there's weird loopholes that if you're found with mushrooms or marijuana in your house as a practitioner, then you're in more trouble. Like my worry is that people like me who just do them with their friends, if they're caught with them, I heard that it's a possibility you would have a higher sentence. But the thing is that it's very rare to get caught. Like the people who have gotten caught have across the board been irresponsible white people who kind of deserved it.
There's a lot of us out there who are irresponsible.
In the case,
so just basically my concern with drug laws is like the inordinate amount of targeting of Black and brown people, and I also. There's so many complicated things in the decriminalization movement that's holding things up, and inability to understand conversations with indigenous communities around peyote. So you step into it and there's this immediate urgency, like this is good, it shouldn't be illegal. But there's also the fact we've made it this far. Psychedelics are very rarely prosecuted unless you're being crazy. When Willie Nelson got busted for marijuana, they found mushrooms in his bus, and I don't think he did the requisite time for the mushrooms that he could have. So, and also I stand by that it's really okay to be part of a culture that has done these things in secret, not just because of colonization and persecution, but because these things are often done in secret for a ton of other reasons having to do with that they're sacred. So I've loosened my opinion from like, that's bogus. They seem to ride the train of the decrim movement into the gate, and then they fucked them over by saying, oh, we're not going to fight for your decrim cause. We're going to make this legalized, which actually corporatizes it and makes a ton of money for people. So I'm not the person to really be the Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the end of the day with this, because for my own psychological approach to the mushrooms, I have to stay back and not get too involved, because it actually makes me mad.
Right.
You know, when I do mushrooms, I get like, you know, and I realize that a lot of that is ego and not actually being built for the politics of it. But I know a whole lot about it. And it seems that the decrim movement feels really screwed over, that the legalization aspect brings aspects of money into the game really quickly when we haven't even had a chance to see what it's like for decrim to happen. But we did see a bit of it in Oakland when decrim happened in a so-called mushroom church that was selling it right out the door, got busted, not for mushrooms, but for weed. I thought the cops were like really smart, because they made it about a marijuana distribution rather than mushrooms, because they were like, we don't want to be in this court talking about mushrooms for 3 years. Yeah. And so they busted him on weed, which for the police was a brilliant idea to avoid troubles, because the guy running the church was like, they'll bust me for mushrooms, and then we'll all go to court and get all this visibility and maybe move the movement forward. You're not going to do that in that caftan you're wearing, dude. Like, it was like a ridiculous like thing he was wearing. I was like, I don't, you know, he wanted the fame of like pushing this stuff forward, and I'm glad they didn't give it to him, honestly. Yeah. So I think it ultimately will benefit things. I think any movement forward legally will benefit. There's just going to be setbacks for various factions.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit that when I first read the ballot measure, I was really angry that it wasn't going to at least allow practitioners to do it with a prescription or not, whatever, but in their homes. Because I know that for myself, I know I wouldn't want to be in a foreign territory without, you know, in a plastic fantastic facility, essentially, or a spa. You know, that wouldn't be a comfortable place for me to do that type of intimate, deep interior work that the mushrooms, you know, offer. I don't want to walk through that gateway where I feel unsafe.
No.
But at the same time, I thought Patrick was probably smart in pointing out that, you know, you have to take baby steps.
Yeah.
You know.
And you can still, you know, okay, like one of the things I say in my book is I'm a lawbreaker. I broke a law. I grew mushrooms. I ate them. I gave them to my friends. I broke. I don't know what time I would get if I was found out, but like, I always say, like, okay, I broke that law, so don't do California stops. Like, don't steal, don't shoplift.
Right.
If you're gonna break one law, you gotta stick to the other laws.
Yeah, follow all the others.
Yeah, you're just like, I'm sorry, I have to do this. Like we did it with marijuana, and you know, like when the marijuana laws were changed, I saw all these people really traumatized of their years of doing something illegally. I did feel that when I was breaking the law and growing them and keeping them, I felt it. For the first time in my life, I was like, the government sees me now as a criminal. And I thought I was exempt because it didn't feel like I was doing something bad. And I knew I wasn't. I knew this was like beneficial to my health and a great thing to do culturally, and that ultimately the government would figure it out and legalize it. But man, I felt in exile. Spiritually, I felt my aura shift. It was unexpected. And I think drug dealers especially deal with a stigma, and it affects the whole course of their life and how they are in relationship with their partners and their families, how people see you when you do something illegal. I had no idea it would affect me. I thought it was exempt, and that has to do with my privilege.
Yeah.
You know, like I meant to just buy the drugs, not grow them.
Right.
I was supposed to go downtown with that little thing and be like, oh, hi, bye. But here I was growing them at my house. and everyone knew it. And
Yeah.
I became a different class of person there. You know, it's always like the liberal elite that kind of look at you askew, you know, like, oh, darling, really?
Well, and I mean, you're living at that point, you're living with an intensified anxiety. I mean, to have
Yeah.
a substance that you feel is okay, like, you know, cannabis before it was legal, or, you know,
Yeah.
the mushrooms now, to have that in your possession, even in
Yeah.
a small quantity, is going to give you a certain amount of anxiety just
Yeah.
because. But now you're
And
growing
then
it.
you're white, so you're like, I'll never get caught. And then it's like, wait a minute, I am a published author talking about these things. And also, as you know, in the book, I was accused of burglary by an ex.
Right.
And so I was already on the police radar. She would call like every 3 days saying that I had mushrooms. And my girlfriend who came along later was like, have you watched The Wire? Like, they might not bust you now, but they have everything on you. So
Yeah.
if you give mushrooms to somebody who goes on to the airport high and then says they got them from me, it's all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's over.
It's
Yeah.
a constant, it's precarious. And that's
Yeah.
the point where you do have to end up with, you have to choose radical trust. You have to trust
Yeah.
the mushrooms to shape the world such that,
Yes.
and that is really, that's a hard piece of trust to extend to anybody. I mean,
And that's why Decrim Plants, I hope we get better leadership in the movement, because I mean, Ann Arbor managed to pass their decrim legislation without having to link in with the national group. And so it's possible to start a decrim proposition without joining, you know, the movement as you find it on the internet. So it makes no sense. Like if you legalize weed, ayahuasca plant combinations, mushrooms, and anything containing mescaline without mentioning peyote out of respect for indigenous communities, I just don't see the harm. But you have the movement of the decriminalization of all drugs. They'll jump down your throat saying, yes, but you know, people are in jail for other things, so you have to decriminalize all drugs. I'm not interested in that. I don't think the communities, whether they're POC communities, indigenous communities, white communities, I don't think everyone 100% wants decriminalization of cocaine and heroin. Period.
No, that does not. To me, it seems like if it's not a highly processed, if it's given to you by nature as it is, I mean, the mushrooms, you just let them dry and then you eat them.
Yes.
You're not
There's
doing,
no meth plant. There's
you're
no
not doing
plants.
anything to change what nature's given you. So it seems like that should not be illegal.
It's
but,
such a simple legal thing. Like it's in court, you would just be like, is it an intact plant?
Yeah.
End of story. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Is it something that was a medicine that was made with standard home medicine making, you know, oh, you dissolved it, you cooked it, you put it into an oil. Is that so terrible? No, that's how you make all your food.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's treated pretty much like the way we treat all of our foods, then it seems like
Yep.
You know.
But we're hell bent with the internet lately on tearing every effort apart, good or bad. It'll just be shredded. So like at this point, I'm advocating for discreet use, that you either grow yourself or buy from a person on a skateboard that you met in the farmer's market.
Right.
You know, like,
Yes. Definitely, I don't want to advocate law breaking. But...
Exactly. These are illegal. You will, if you get caught, you will have some altercation with the law.
Yes.
Well,
but
I mean,
I'm speaking culturally.
Right. Well, I was listening to your talk on the decriminalization of it, and that's the second ballot measure we have is 110, which decriminalizes amounts. So
small amounts,
if you do have mushrooms outside of a place and you're walking and they happen to arrest you, you're going to get a misdemeanor.
Oh, cool.
And then if there's something else involved, then it can go a little higher. But basically, it's a fine now, and so they're removing the stigma of being arrested or for that charge. So like you said, if you had mushrooms and you were charged, that would affect your professional career. It would affect everything you do. Well, where this would say, you're not a bad person. You had a mushroom on you. We're not going to take away your medical license. We're not going to do that.
Yay!
Yeah.
Well, Well, that's amazing. So that's the same ballot?
It's there. Well,
then
it's two different measures.
Yeah,
but
there's
but two
109
different measures.
is the
That's
psilocybin, and then 110 is the decrim.
Well, that definitely makes me feel less antagonistic towards the move they made towards simple legalization for therapy, because there are some options.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they want that. That's what they want. They have every right to move that forward. And I don't think anything, even going down to like Peter Thiel's doing psilocybin analog compounds, ultimately needs to have anything to do with me. You know, like I don't advocate it. I think it's a deformed plant entity, but you know, this isn't my people. This is not the realm I move in.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure the same conversation happens in herbalism, because so many, what you have, aspirin is made out of willow bark, basically.
Right.
And you've lost a lot. You know, if you ask that tree to help you with pain, the amount of, you know, relationship you have to your body is extremely accentuated.
Yes. Well, I mean, in one of the common conversations we have in herbalism is the question of whether or not recognizing this particular molecule and isolating it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Because so often the plants bring to the table not just that one molecule, but a whole plethora, and it's a system that works together. That's what makes it medicine. A molecule is not medicine, you know.
Psilocybin has five or six different compounds in them. There's psilocybin. They're trying to just create a psilocybin analog, but there's psilocin. There's also, I didn't know, this is recently discovered, there's an MAOI in the mushroom that we didn't know about. I tend to like to do psilocybin with Syrian rue, which is an MAOI. But the fact the mushroom already has an MAOI built into it is extraordinary.
Okay, wait a second.
Very interesting.
You're
going to have to explain MAOI.
What's an MAOI?
Yeah, and MAOI is it's in turmeric. It's an antidepressant. It's it does something with your tryptamines, and you can't eat certain foods will act strangely with it, and you shouldn't be on like too much Adderall or things like that. Although mushrooms has such a low amount, it's not going to hurt you. But an MAOI inhibitor is a potentiator for any psychedelic. So DMT is in the chacruna plant. The ayahuasca is solely an MAOI inhibitor. So when you're saying ayahuasca, the plant itself is an MAOI. So it extends a trip longer. It does something to what a psychedelic is. It gives it like longevity, depth, a certain sensory experience that the DMT or the mushrooms would not have on their own.
Right. So it accentuates it? It
accentuates it. It gives it a different textural quality. Chocolate has MAOI, turmeric has MAOI.
I want to say St. John's wort also does.
That's an MAOI.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why it's such a iffy, dangerous, doesn't always work with people if they're having a bizarre diet or drink a lot. Yeah. So MAOI is a very fragile, very sensitive compound. And I do it with the mushrooms because it gives me a no escape route. It makes a mushroom trip, instead of like this open-ended fun thing, with an MAOI, it's like you have blood pressure, heat issues, and it, like, if you don't pray or do the right thing exactly when you need to do it, you can have a bad trip.
Right.
It's why ayahuasca is like, oh, that kicked my ass or whatever. Whereas I think DMT, you have a bad trip or a good trip, but you're not like, you don't have the potential to land in hell like you do with like ayahuasca or psilohuasca. They call it psilohuasca. Yeah. So where did I? Oh yeah. So with the analogs and things, you don't have those relationships. And when I did ayahuasca for the first time in Mexico, it was an Ecuadorian shaman who said that there was like macaw medicine and jaguar medicine in the brew. And I realized he was talking about other plants. Yeah. So they would have a lineage of a jaguar plant, or literally they would just say it was jaguar, but it was probably a plant that was added to it that created a particular resonance that was the shaman's lineage, and that's also hugely important. You
Yeah.
talk about it, herbalism, even people who make their fire ciders have their lineage and the little thing they put in it. That's so important.
Yeah, I mean, herbal medicine that's made by hand by a specific herbalist, whomever that may be, that herbalist is putting an energy into it, and part of their spirit or part of the way that the energy of the plants work together as a team, and the way they shape themselves is partially directed by the herbalist putting it together, which makes some herbal preparations more powerful for an individual person, whoever the individual is, than others. And it's about, it's part of why we have such a wide selection of approaches to herbalism, because there are so many different people and each person has their own unique needs, and you need to find the right herbalist to work with. Just like you find
lineage, timing, the ancestral karma of a person, the astrology of their own life, like when somebody literally gets healed of like uterine cancer from raspberry tea, it's not scientific, but it's real, and it happens because of all those intersections of the person's life and the timing and all of it. And so I find it tragic that people miss out on the entire story of relationality of the entire natural world and our personal relationships, because I think that's why we're here. So it's great we have Aspirin, but people are missing out.
I don't like to say that I think everybody should do any specific thing. I mean, not everybody should do ginger. Ginger isn't appropriate for everybody. But, there's a place for Western medicine. Aspirin has its place. There are times where, some of the really heavy-hitting drugs or crisis medicine intervention are the right one. And everybody, plants included, will definitely agree. But there are so many times in our lives where those aren't the right approaches, and we don't culturally know to look elsewhere. And
the return to the plant, I think, is a very old story. Last time I did a very high mushroom dose. It was 25 grams with Syrian rue, and they were saying one of the oldest stories, and it continues to this day. And there's a lot of old stories that don't mean anything anymore, but the oldest story is you've gone to college, you found your guru, none of it worked out, you've lost your wife, all of it. And then a little tiny mushroom tells you that it all makes sense and you're good and you did the right thing and you did everything you could in this life, and like, I think that's the story of the plants. It's not just the story of the mushroom. It's that thing that just is like, we were here all along, loving you the whole time.
Yes. And you need to have your experiences. You can't have love without having experienced hate. You can't have light without having experienced dark. So, it's what the plants are teaching.
And studying something up and down and realizing you still didn't know a damn thing about it.
Right.
Until you just found its essence.
Yeah.
You found its essence. Like you have a PhD in the thing, and then it said something that you didn't know.
Right.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so beautiful. So I want to thank you. Excuse me. I want to thank you for writing The Wild Kindness. I enjoyed it. I loved it. And I think that you're going to be opening an awful lot of doors for a lot of people. So
except for that everyone's safe.
Yes.
Because I know they really are the safest drug. Like when you study emergency room visits and such, they're the safest thing, even more than caffeine, right? But if I was to say, what is the danger of mushrooms? I would say, do you think poetry is dangerous? Right. And if somebody says no, I would say you haven't really engaged with poetry.
Right.
I say that the path of an artist, I say the mushrooms are easy, but writing my book was a don't do this at home situation.
Oh, yeah.
Embarking on philosophical inquiry is the most dangerous path we have as humans. And not everybody needs to do that.
Right. Right. So true. So how can people find you?
They can find me. I'm on Instagram under Feral Williams, like feral. And I have a website called bettwilliams.com. I'm starting a book club. So if you get a hold of the book early enough to read it by November 12th, you can hop in on a free Zoom with a chapter by chapter guide, which find me on bettwilliams.com for that. And yeah.
Cool. And I feel like I'm supposed to be asking one more question.
I don't think so.
No, I think we got it.
Awesome.
Where is the best place for people to buy the book? Do you have a link through your website or?
I think there's a link on my website, but bookshop.org is the fastest way if you don't want to go through Amazon.
I love bookshop.org. I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. At first, it was because of COVID, it was taking 2 months to get my book even on Amazon. That was really frustrating. But now it seems to have worked itself out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have an audio book eventually.
Lovely. All righty. Well, thank you so very much for being with us today.
I guess with that, put
an herb on it.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.